You think you know the story of Dracula, a pale-fanged monster cooked up by a Victorian novelist. Forget it. The truth is infinitely more terrifying. It begins not in a Gothic castle, but in a field of death. In 1462, an invading army of over 100,000 men, led by a legendary sultan, halted in pure horror. They weren't stopped by soldiers. They were stopped by a forest of 20,000 impaled bodies. History calls it psychological warfare. First brutal but strategic move by a prince to save his people. But what if that's the cover story? What if this gruesome display wasn't just a warning to an invading army, but a massive blood-soaked ritual, a sacrifice on a scale that's almost unimaginable? The man responsible wasn't a monster, not yet. He was a prince, a crusader, a member of a sacred order created to defend Christendom, the Order of the Dragon. His name was Vlad III, son of Dracula. And what we're about to explore isn't just the story of a tyrant. It's the hidden history of a warrior initiate, the terrifying Romanian myths of the strigoi, the living dead, and the possibility that Vlad's cruelty wasn't madness, but a dark magical path to power. The question isn't if he was a monster, it's what kind of monster he was trying to become. To understand the monster, we first have to understand the man. And to understand the man, we have to look at the name his father carried, Dracula. Not devil, as it's often translated, but dragon. His father was a member of the elite order of the Dragon, a secret society of monarchs and warlords sworn by the Holy Roman Emperor to crush the enemies of the cross. A pretty straightforward job description. The methods, however, were left open to interpretation. But this was more than a medieval fight club. The dragon is a primordial symbol. It represents both the gold-hoarding beast of chaos and the winged serpent of wisdom. Duality, power, the kind of power Vlad would be obsessed with his entire life. His obsession was forged in the gilded cage of the Ottoman Empire. Picture this. As a young boy, Vlad and his brother are handed over as political hostages to the Sultan. He spends his formative years deep inside the belly of the beast, learning their language, their tactics, their Quran, and their cruelty. He witnessed a level of sophisticated brutality that would make a seasoned general sick to his stomach. This wasn't a prison of stone and iron. It was a psychological furnace designed to break him or turn him into steel. It turned him into something far harder. When he finally returned to his homeland of Wallachia, a blood-soaked region we now know as Romania, he wasn't just a prince reclaiming his throne. He was a weapon, calibrated and aimed at his former captors. But here's where the official history gets hazy and the shadows start to speak. Because Wallachia wasn't just a battleground of empires, it was a land steeped in ancient, terrifying folklore. Long before Bram Stoker picked up a pen, the people of the Carpathian Mountains whispered tales of the strigoi. These aren't your elegant, dinner jacket-wearing vampires. The strigoi are something far more primal. They are the troubled dead, souls who cannot rest. But they are also the living, witches and warlocks who on certain nights were believed to leave their physical bodies behind and rise as spirits to drain the life force of livestock, and sometimes people. They could command storms, curdle, milk, and sow plague. To the peasants of medieval Wallachia, this wasn't fiction, this was a Tuesday. It was a genuine operational part of their reality, as real as the tax collector or the threat of invasion. Now, imagine you are Vlad. You are a man who has seen the absolute limits of human strategy and military might. You've seen armies win and lose, fortresses fall. But you also rule a land where people believe a disgruntled sorcerer can wipe out a village from miles away. Do you dismiss it as peasant superstition? Or do you start to wonder if there's a power there you can use? This is the hypothesis that historians rarely touch. Vlad's legendary cruelty wasn't random, it followed a pattern. He didn't just execute his enemies, he performed. The chronicles, written by his terrified enemies and awestruck admirers alike, are very specific. The impalements, the boiling of corrupt nobles, dining calmly in his forest of the dead. These acts were so theatrical, so ritualistic, they beg the question. Was he just terrorizing his enemies, or was he feeding something else? Think of his court at Târgoviște. Not a glittering European palace, but a raw, fortified nerve center. From here, he dispensed a form of justice so swift and absolute it became legend. A golden cup was left in the town square, and for his entire reign, no one dared steal it. Order through absolute terror. But was it just about order? Or was he consecrating the land with fear, turning his entire principality into a fortress, not just of stone and soldiers, but of psychic dread? The connection between Vlad and the strigoi is more than just a coincidence of geography. The law states that those who live a life of great evil or die a violent death are at risk of becoming strigoi. Vlad, the ultimate dispenser of violent death, was surrounded by it. So what if his methods were a form of dark spiritual sanitation, a twisted logic where impaling a body on a stake wasn't just to kill the man, but to pin his soul to the earth, preventing it from rising as a vengeful spirit? It's a chilling thought. A prince so desperate to save his people that he'd bargain with the very darkness his subjects feared most. Already intrigued? Hit subscribe so you don't miss what comes next. Because the evidence we're about to examine suggests this wasn't just a defensive strategy. It was an initiation. This is where the story takes a turn from historical brutality into something else. Something that feels like it's been torn from a grimoire. Let's go back to that forest of the dead. Mainstream history presents it as a masterstroke of psychological warfare, and it was. Sultan Mehmed II, the man who conquered Constantinople, the unbreakable city, literally turned back his army in disgust and fear. But some details from the chronicles are too specific, too strange to be purely military. The chronicles, like the one by the Byzantine historian Leonikos Chalkokondyles, describe the scene with obsessive detail. Not just the number of bodies, but their arrangement. It wasn't a chaotic mess of corpses. It was organized, structured. Some historians like Radu Florescu and Raymond T. McNally, who pioneered this research in their book In Search of Dracula, hinted at a darker purpose. What if this wasn't just a display? What if it was a giant, horrific, magical circle? A blood sacrifice on a national scale, designed not just to terrify the Ottomans, but to harness the raw energy of death itself. Let's be clear, this isn't about casting spells from a book. In many ancient warrior traditions, the line between battlefield and sacred ground was blurry. The Norse berserkers, the Celtic warriors painting themselves in woad, they were all trying to tap into a state of consciousness beyond normal human limits, a battle fury, a divine madness. What if Vlad was attempting the Romanian equivalent? The strigoi lore is key here. According to some folk traditions analyzed by researchers like Gail Kligman, strigoi were not just malevolent spirits, they were masters of a kind of life force vampirism. They could draw power from the living and the dying. Now consider Vlad, surrounded by death, dining amidst the screams of his victims, breathing in an atmosphere thick with terror. Was he simply a sadist enjoying his work? Or was he, as some esoteric theories propose, acclimating his own spirit to this energy? Was he trying to learn, through brutal first-hand experience, how to become a predator of souls? The most chilling piece of this puzzle comes from a different source. German and Russian pamphlets printed shortly after his death. These were the 15th century equivalent of viral news. They depicted Vlad as a monster, a demon, roasting children and forcing mothers to eat them. Pure propaganda, right? Almost certainly. They were meant to demonize a political enemy. But propaganda often works by twisting a kernel of truth. What was the truth they were twisting? It was Vlad's obsession with the mechanics of life and death. One story, which appears in multiple sources, describes him bringing in physicians and asking them, in meticulous detail, how long a person could live after being impaled in a certain way. This isn't just cruelty. This is research. This is a man studying the threshold between life and death with the detached curiosity of a scientist, a very, very disturbed scientist. So what would happen if this knowledge was applied? What if the legends are true and Vlad wasn't just killing his enemies, but attempting to trap their spirits, to study them, or even to consume their vital energy in some kind of occult ritual? He wouldn't just be the Impaler Lord, he would be a gatekeeper, a man who controlled the flow of souls from this world to the next, using his kingdom as a giant laboratory for necromantic science. This theory reframes everything. His fight against the Ottomans wasn't just a war for territory, it was a war for reality itself. He wasn't just defending Wallachia, he was trying to turn it into a place where the laws of nature were subordinate to his will, a place where death was not an end, but a tool. The question then becomes, and did he succeed? What if the ultimate goal of the Order of the Dragon wasn't just to defeat an enemy, but to become something more than human to do it? Something permanent. In the end, the dragon was slain. In 1476, Vlad was ambushed and killed, betrayed by the very nobles he had fought so hard to control. His head was severed, preserved in honey, and sent to Sultan Mehmed II in Constantinople as a gruesome trophy. A definitive bloody end to the story of the Impaler. Or was it? He may have failed to achieve physical immortality, but what if the rituals, the sacrifices, the entire reign of terror had an unintended side effect? What if they weren't meant to preserve his body, but to permanently imprint his essence, his terror, his will, onto the world itself? If that was the goal, he succeeded beyond imagination. The name Dracula has achieved a kind of immortality that emperors and sultans can only dream of. A dark echo that has outlived empires. His physical legend was defeated, but his metaphysical one conquered the globe. It's a classic case of winning the war after losing the final battle. And that brings us to the final tantalizing loose end, the most concrete piece of our hunt: his body. Official history places his tomb in a monastery on Snagov, an island fortress, shrouded in mist, a fitting final resting place. But when archaeologists excavated the site in the 1930s, the tomb believed to be his was inconclusive. They found some animal bones, fragments of jewelry, but no body that could be definitively identified as the fearsome Wallachian prince. The grave was essentially empty, so the ultimate question remains unanswered. Where is Vlad Dracula? Was he simply moved to an unmarked grave, his story finished? Or was his final act a secret that didn't involve a tomb at all? We are left with a ghost. A story that is part recorded history, part national myth, and part a chilling warning. A warning about the razor-thin line between a savior and a monster, and what happens when a leader decides he is willing to sacrifice humanity itself in order to save it. And that's our hunt for now. A wild mix of documented history and tantalizing what-ifs based on bibliographical sources. What do you think? Was Vlad a misunderstood hero, a mad tyrant, or something else entirely? Liked this journey? Hit subscribe for more mysteries, because the greatest secrets are the ones still waiting to be unearthed.